Are you the type of person who is proactively scanning your partner, even anticipating your avoidance needs? You may be giving emotionally, pragmatically, intimately, and some of you maybe even financially. Yet somehow your needs are just not being met. I've worked with people like this who even go to the point of total depletion. And in extreme cases, it might cost you your emotional and physical health. So if you're feeling like you're endlessly giving, you're over functioning, and your avoidant partner is just taking, then this video is for you. Hi, I'm Gabriel. I run simplytogether.co with my wife Carolina. Now, many anxious avoidant relationships eventually fall into this pattern. The anxious partner often becomes the caring giver, and the avoidant partner becomes the taker. And I'm going to explain how all this plays out with the help of Brooke and Andy's anonymized story. So, Brooke certainly didn't set out to become the giver in her relationship with Andy. It happened very slowly. But one day she kind of realized that she was the only one actively steering the relationship and felt like she was just giving. So let's take a moment to talk about the key characteristics of givers. So, since a giver is constantly thinking a few steps ahead of their partner's needs, before Andy even said a word about a rough day at work, Brooke had already picked up on his mood and was very accommodating of his headspace. So she had this classic anxious attachment trait of being hyper attuned to his needs. She would scan for what's needed before it was even asked for. Givers are often proactive in this way. When there's a problem, the giver is usually the one who brings it up, who researches how to fix it, who reads the books, books the therapy sessions, and takes the notes. And givers tend to take responsibility fast, sometimes faster than they should. And when something goes wrong, their instinct is to look at themselves first and ask, what could I have done differently? Where did I fall short? And this instinct sounds healthy in small doses, but it becomes a problem when it tips into over functioning, which I think is just so important to address. Because when the anxious partner is carrying so much of the emotional weight of the relationship that the avoidant partner barely has to lift anything at all, it becomes incredibly imbalanced. Now let's talk about the key characteristics of takers. Andy, without meaning to, became more of a taker. This was where his avoidant attachment showed up as well. Not as malice, but as a kind of blindness to his partner's needs. So this wasn't intentional, but takers aren't often thinking ahead about what their partner wants. And it's often because they're so overwhelmingly consumed by their own problems. So it simply doesn't occur to them to be proactive the way it does to a giver. So when problems come up, takers tend to hang back rather than lean in and wait to see if the issue resolves itself or if their partner will handle it. And when they're confronted, their first move isn't going to be reflective on their behavior. It's likely to be defensive, and they will push back because they feel criticized and uncomfortable. Now, there is a caveat in all of this that's important to mention before I go any further. Calling someone a taker doesn't mean they give nothing at all. Andy showed love in his own way. He was actually very fond of surprising Brooke with gifts and romantic moments. He also showed his love in acts of service. He'd fix up their home, take care of their car and finances. The trouble is that his way of giving didn't actually match what Brooke needed. She needed emotional intimacy and connection. He gave logistics and grand gestures. So two people can both be giving just in different currencies that the other person doesn't recognize as payment. Which brings us to the dynamic that givers and takers often fall into. This is where the anxious avoidant dynamic can very quietly creep up and lock you guys into place. In this case, Brooke kept giving Andy exactly what he needed: the space, the patience, reassurance that he wasn't in trouble or she wasn't mad at him. And in the process, she started to lose track of her own needs entirely. Her empathy, which should have been her strength, got dialed up so high that it became something Andy started to experience as pressure. The more attuned Brooke was to Andy's moods, the more Andy felt watched, and the more he pulled back, which of course made Brooke lean in closer to close the gap. So her care, her strength, offered with the best of intentions, started to feel like surveillance and control to him. And this is what was so hard for her. She started to feel invisible in her own relationship because she was trying so hard to give him what he needed, and yet somehow all it seemed to do was create a bigger rift between the two of them. Thankfully, she eventually reached a breaking point and cried out that she was giving, giving, and giving all the time, and she was exhausted of it. So she did express her frustration, but Andy retaliated by saying, well, he never asked for her to do any of this, as if her years of anticipating his needs had just been her own project, one he didn't sign up for and didn't owe her anything back for. So you can end up in a situation where the anxious partner ends up feeling resentful and exhausted, and the avoidant partner ends up feeling controlled and confused as to why they're being blamed for things they never asked for. When couples reach this point, there is obviously a lot of misunderstanding on both sides as to what the other is actually asking for or is upset about. And that requires work in clarifying things, rehauling a lot of the backlog that hasn't been addressed and clarified. Which brings us to the point of finding balance here. And this is kind of my key message to you guys out there that find themselves being in this giver situation. There are a couple of things I would recommend you do to try and recalibrate how much energy and attention you're putting outwards towards your avoidant partner who's potentially just taking and redirecting a lot of that back to you. So here are a couple of steps that I would say would help you do that. The first thing is you need to step back and let there be some emptiness. Stop anticipating your partner's needs before they say anything. Stop being the one who brings every problem to the table with a solution already attached. And stop taking blame that isn't fully yours to take either. And the reason you want to do this is because your avoidant partner has to actually feel the absence of what you were doing. They have to notice for the first time that something isn't being handled for them. Which brings us to the next step. Let them fail. This is the hardest part because when you stop over-functioning, your partner may not rise to meet the gap right away. They might drop something, forget something, disappoint you in a way you spent years preventing. Watching that happen can confront you with a version of your avoidant partner you worked very hard never to see. Someone who, left to their own devices, doesn't show up the way you needed. And that can be very confrontational and very disappointing. Now, I want you to understand why this matters. If you keep stepping in and rescuing the moment where things start to go wrong, you're unknowingly reinforcing this exact giver-taker dynamic every time you fill those gaps. Because your avoidant partner doesn't have a chance to notice it. You're teaching them that they never need to. And real change requires them to actually repeatedly experience and see their own limitations and failures when you're not there to catch the fall. This is what will help you conserve some of your energy and also make them see and acknowledge just how much you're bringing to the table to make this relationship function the way it has been. Now, I've worked with a lot of people through this process, and I know that it can be very hard to be willing to take this step. It might even feel impossible to some of you because it's really scary to be confronted with what happens when you don't fix the problems. So I would say that internal resistance, if you have it, is worth examining honestly. And you can ask yourself, what are you afraid would happen if you let that void sit there, if you didn't step in? Is it that your partner failing to fill it would feel like your own failure? A sign that you didn't love them hard enough to change them and make them better? Is it guilt over abandoning them, even briefly? Or maybe fear that if you stop over-functioning like this, they'll pull away entirely and you'll lose them for good. Just take a moment to ask yourself these questions and uncover whatever fears you might have here. Otherwise, you can be trapped in constantly recreating the giving and taking imbalance that you're actually trying to fight simply by stepping in too soon. This exact pattern, Brooke overgiving and Andy under noticing, is a common trap we see with anxious avoidant couples. And it's why we built an entire chapter around it called the anxious avoidant trap, where we walk you through exactly how this dynamic forms without either person intending it to. And more importantly, how to interrupt it before it escalates. So if you want to apply that to your own relationship, be sure to check out our attachment avoidant program. I'll leave the link in the video description below. Of course, if you found this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with someone that you think could benefit from it, and subscribe if you want to hear more from us. I also have a watch next suggestion for you guys that my wife made that will make your avoidant take your boundaries seriously and help you finally get more of your needs met in your relationship. You can click here to watch that video now.